Welcome back to the Bastards of Boston podcast. I am Nicholas Kane, and I'll be one of your wonderful hosts today. Unfortunately, the Sox drop the third game of the series against the Mets 5-1. What do you boys think?
Jim, who the hell is this guy?
Am I on the wrong podcast?
No, not at all. I am your long-haired friend, the new entry, who's also afraid of a barber, according to one. You know, I feel like you can't really say that as a Sox fan. We've walked out some absolute bearded beasts, you know? We're not the Yankees here.
Oh, so Nick 3.0. Got it.
That's right.
Yeah, Nick.
Third
Nick.
time's the charm, maybe.
Sounds good.
All
Well,
right,
welcome, Nick. Nice to meet you.
Thank you. So where do we start tonight? Obviously, there is some talk about Crochet and the bullpen management and Cora. Who wants to lead that off?
I feel like I just wrote an article about this, but
Because you did.
yeah, I did. Yeah, I mean, Cora overmanaged us out of a sweep, and too many times this season, it has become imminently clear that the Red Sox will drop what should be the easiest win of a series. They find a way to win the games they shouldn't, and then when they have opportunity right in front of them, they just let it slip. I'm at a loss at this point. You know, I should be ecstatic. We should all be ecstatic taking 2 out of 3, and I think in most cases we would be, but this is like a rerun that we just keep watching over and over and over for the 2025 season, becoming increasingly frustrating. Jim, I can't wait to hear your perspective on this.
You know, I'm not a Cora fan, number one. Number two, the fact that, you know, Crochet had 85 pitches. You've got your ace on the mound after your bullpen has been completely taxed over the last couple of days. You had Buehler leaving the game early yesterday because he was thrown out because, according to Laz Diaz, he was off the mound when, in fact, he was on the mound. But that's a story maybe for later on this afternoon or tonight. The bottom line here is that you needed more out of Crochet. I don't know why Cora does this. I know, obviously, since they signed him to the deal, the contract extension, I think they're obviously want to worry about his innings and so forth. And, you know, it's a big investment. But the bottom line here is that 85 pitches, he could have went the end of that 6th inning. We needed to get at least 7 out of him. 8 would have been great, especially with a 1-1 tie at the time. I mean, you know, you start thinking to yourself, oh, God, is this going to go into extras? And what do we got available? You know, Hendricks wants to pitch more innings, and okay, he got himself out of the 6th, but then the 7th, he just vomited all over himself. So, you know, it's very difficult because this team has been mid the entire season at 25-25 coming into this game. You know, you have your ace on the mound. You took 2 so far from arguably one of the best teams in baseball this season in the Mets, and you have a chance to sweep, which, you know, is – at least if you did that, you'd say to yourself, wow, you know, you beat a team that's in contention for a playoff spot. You know, maybe they're not as bad as we think. This just doesn't work. And I think Cora gets in the way of success of this team. And this stuff has to stop because now you go through Hendricks, you go through Bernardino, you go through Newcomb. I mean, yeah, you got the Orioles coming in, but you can't rely on these guys coming back and, you know, just getting completely taxed even more. Really big mistake. This loss is on Cora. End of story.
Yeah, I have to completely agree. You know, I saw something that, honestly, some people are saying it as if it makes it better, but for me, it makes it worse, which is the fact that the reason that Crochet was coming out of the game so early today at 85 pitches was because he has pitched 100 pitches, 100 plus, the past 2 starts. But for me, that makes it worse because that means it was premeditated. You knew that Crochet wasn't going to be available to go a long stretch. And so with that in mind, why didn't we make a call up to a guy like Guerrero, who pitched tonight in Worcester? Why didn't we have a guy like him? Or if you really want to punt the game away, pull up Criswell. I'm not sure if he's pitched recently. I think he last started a game about 6 days ago. Maybe push Crochet off a day, as crazy as that sounds. You know, make sure that with your ace on the mound, you're in a good position to actually go out there and win it in a tight scenario. We know that the Sox have struggled in one-run games. We know the Sox have struggled in late innings, and certainly there was more of the same with that tonight. but it really just does feel like this game was closer than the final score indicates. After yesterday, I was pretty happy with a series victory, but coming in and losing like this, it's not just frustrating, it's very disheartening, and it feels again like we're sort of taking any momentum we build up and just dumpstering it.
Yeah, it's totally a gut punch. I mean, you have to feel good going into game 3 of a 3-game series again against a competitive team that's probably going to be a playoff contender the rest of the season. And you had an opportunity to just, sweep them. You want to talk about momentum? I'm not a big momentum guy, but at least you'd say to yourself, chalk this one up as another victory. You got Baltimore coming in, who has really been a surprise, if you will. The fact that they've been this bad this season. I don't think anybody really had that on their bingo card. In fact, I thought they would be contending with the Yankees neck and neck, but it is what it is. So now you say you got 4 with Baltimore coming in. Oh, geez, maybe I take 3 or I sweep them. It's at home. Now you're looking at 6, 7 games that you're winning at home, and that could propel you right into, another playoff spot or be closer to the Yankees at first place. I mean, at the end of the day, the Garrett Crochet games are games you cannot afford to lose. All right. If 10 games over 500 could get you into a playoff spot, Crochet should be able to do that on his own and be 10 over, as long as the rest of the staff can be 500 the rest of the entire season. That would get you a playoff spot. You can't lose these games.
Yeah, I think, to your point, Nick, there's been too many moments this season where we see Crochet going 100 or close to 100, and it's not even necessary in those moments. And I think that's the real head scratcher for me, is that, Garrett Crochet goes 85 pitches. The bullpen is completely taxed in this series, especially after yesterday, with Cora and Buehler both being thrown out. So I just don't get it. Why ride him like the horse that he is in moments when you don't need to? And then in a game like this, where we have opportunity in front of us, and I agree with you, Jim, is that I'm not a big momentum guy, but I am an opportunity guy. And this was an opportunity to sweep a team that I would even venture to say that, like, the Mets are competing for a World Series, at least in their mind. They're going into it. They've approached it like that's the goal for them. Whether they do or not is a whole other story. And we had that opportunity to sweep them. And then to your point, we have Baltimore coming in. They're reeling. They're not nearly as good as they should be. And that's another opportunity where all of a sudden now, forget about momentum. We're taking the opportunity and we're building on it to a point where it's like we have it in front of us and we're taking it, which we've been reluctant to do all season long. And Garrett Crochet, for us to be 10 over, he's got to win at least 75% of the starts, minimum. And I don't even think he's relatively close. Does anyone know what his record is now at this point?
Crochet?
Not sure.
Yeah. I'm going to...
4-3. He's 4-3. He had a no decision.
Yeah.
Right?
So
an ERA of 198.
That's wild.
Yeah.
You have a sub-2 ERA and you're 1 game over 500 for your own record.
And guys, he doesn't have a victory at home yet.
That's just shameful. And a big part of that, I think, obviously, wins are a team stat, right? Where's the team behind them? Because tonight, that offense was just pitiful. Tyler McGill came out and he finally started to fall apart in that sort of circus act that was the 5th inning. But the first 4 innings, he was not just cruising, he was slaughtering us. He was stuffing those fastballs, those sliders right down our throats. It was beyond ugly. And McGill, I've been following him a bit since the start of the season. I've been interested in him. He's had a bad month so far, but he's been a good pitcher. He has strikeout ability, but the problem with him coming into this game is he walks guys. He has bad control. Didn't look like that tonight, certainly. I have written down here 55 strikes on 85 pitches. I think a lot of those balls were actually in his final inning, so we're very lucky that we were able to chase him out. Or maybe not, since we were preying on him. But it's just frustrating to go out there, and the Mets have a good pitching staff, no doubt about it. But to go out and strike out 16 times, Bregman wearing the golden sombrero, I believe, for the first time in his regular season career,
yep,
that's just unacceptable to me.
Yeah, I think there's two trends I saw in this game. Really, now one is a long term for the Sox beyond the season, and one is for the Mets. And they say history repeats itself. And the last time we got lefty horse ace from the White Sox, we had Chris Sale, and we all know, regardless of how we feel about Chris Sale and his tenure here in the Sox, we did not give him nearly the run support that he deserved when he was in his prime for the Sox. I'm seeing the same thing with Garrett Crochet, right? So there's one trend that's over one season. Say what you want about it. The other thing is the Mets have actually feasted on aces this season. They have struggled against the second, third, and cleanup starters in a pitching rotation, and somehow feasted off of teams' best pitching, which is odd because their offense is very reminiscent of ours, where they have these weird struggles. Obviously, Juan Soto's off to a really rough start in comparison to the contract that he received. But the difference is they have one of the best records in baseball, and more than likely will be playing in October. And I don't necessarily know if I could say the same about the Red Sox. And if I was a betting man, I would say no.
Jaron Duran, Rafael Devers, and Nick Sogard were the only three in the lineup that did not strike out 2 times or more. This is pathetic. They're second in all of baseball in strikeouts now after the Rockies, something like that. I mean, this is just ridiculous. I mean, all right, Bregman 4 strikeouts. Some of those were close calls as that he took. But the bottom line here is that for a team that is trying to sell us on contact, lower the amount of strikeouts, and so forth, I mean, their record is abysmal in games where they've strike out 10 or more. It's sad to even know that that's a stat, because what that tells me is they've got multiple games of 10 strikeouts or more to be able to come up with a stat like that. This can't happen. You can't do that. Maybe once or twice a month you get your Scoobles that are going to strike out 10 or more. But this is a reoccurring thing. And against a guy that, he could, like Nick said, he could strike guys out, but he's not really a strikeout machine. This is just unacceptable offensively. And I got some things in the defense too when we get to that.
Most definitely. We have this problem in team identity, I think, where we keep swinging for the fences, but we're not striking out as little as teams that are hitting way more home runs. If you're going to be going with this bat speed and reckless abandon, and especially if you're going to be chasing balls out of the zone, you need to be hitting doubles, triples, home runs consistently. That's sort of the trade off there. Otherwise, you be patient, you sit back, you take a walk. I'm a guy, I love seeing walks. Moneyball, great movie. We had one tonight, and it was from Devers, who has fortunately been kind of the anchoring discipline type of guy in our lineup so far. Teams are scared of him, and he is willing to say, okay, you want to pass the baton to the guy behind me? You want to put me on base? Let's do it, Ultimately, what we saw in the 5th inning is that good things tend to happen when you put a ball in play. When you force the opposing team to play defense, to make those tight plays, you will see mistakes occur and opportunities come out of that. We loaded the bases and we weren't able to do anything like that. Trevor Story batting so high in the lineup still. I mean, for me, he's hitting not even like a guy you want batting 8th or 9th at this point. He's just not hitting at all. And unfortunately, like you said, the defense cost us tonight. Both Campbell with a lot of close calls. He had a very wild ride that could have been a lot worse, overrunning a ground ball. I think that was in the 1st inning. Sort of stumbling, trying to catch a pop-up that looked routine, and then unfortunately flubbing a double play ball, only getting one out of it. I can't help but feel that Campbell is being put under a little too much stress. I know that's something that a lot of people have been saying, first base, second base, center field, left field. Let the guy learn a position, especially because his glove was never his strength. Unfortunately, Trevor Story's glove was his strength, and he's just not playing like a shortstop right now. The range is not good. The arm cost us tonight, and it's getting really hard to roll him out as an everyday starter at this point, I feel.
Oh, there's no doubt. Go ahead,
Oh,
Chris.
I was gonna say, Nick, I real quick, you just embodied about the lineup from a strikeout perspective and swinging for the fences. I was actually gonna say that one of the trends that concerns me the most, I mean, besides the fact that today 6 out of our 9 hitters had multiple strikeouts, but Campbell over the last, let's call it, month and a half, has quietly gotten down to a place where his batting average is lower than Rafaela, who has also been known to swing for the fences. Granted, he's doing it at the bottom of the lineup. Um, but Campbell, I mean, he has the defensive struggles, right? And that dates back to even as early as the Cardinals series, where that should have been a very quick ending to a game. And he had a couple of errors that turned into an interesting game. And it appears in moments that are not necessarily the most costly to this point. But yeah, I think we're screwing with the kid's head at this point. And it's a lot. And when you're kind of void of true leadership from a culture perspective, and you're a rookie and you know you've got 2 rookies that are trying to come up and make the team, like, it's a lot going on at once. You're trying to switch positions. I think just it's a recipe for a disaster right now. But yeah, he really embodies a lot of like what the problems are with our lineup currently. I mean, I look at like the first base batting average, it's like 218, only 16 RBIs on the season, and it's 25th in all of Major League Baseball at that position. That's crazy. So
One key point on the defense. So I've been very vocal on this podcast as it relates to Christian Campbell. And everybody can do the rah-rah that he raised his hand and said that he'll play first base. And I've got a lot to say on that, and I've said a lot on that as it relates to Rafael Devers and not wanting to play the position. My problem with him is that they're teaching him, before games on all the fundamentals to play first base. And then we have no idea what he's going to play for the game, right? All of a sudden he's in center. Today he's at second. That feed to Story on that play was terrible. And I don't blame him one freaking bit because he doesn't get the opportunity to try enough and learn at second base. And let's not even talk about Trevor Story because he smells, okay? This guy, early on in the year, while we were playing 4A baseball teams, sure, he's hitting over 300, had an OPS over 800. Well, he's dropped, almost 100 points now in his batting average? So on the season, okay, he has 43 hits and 61 strikeouts. He's got 189 at-bats. So 1 of every 3 at-bats is a strikeout with this guy. His arm was terrible. If he was the old Trevor Story with an arm, he would have had Acuna at first base. There's no question. So what does he do here? What does he do well here other than take John Henry's money at this point? If I were the Red Sox, he would have been DFA'd already, and Meyer would have been up here.
Yeah, it's hard to disagree. I, for one, am not entirely out on Trevor's Story just because we do also have David Hamilton and Toro still on this roster. And I'm wondering, something's got to give there. I am all for the idea of Story to first at this point because the least he can do is plug a hole for us. The very bare minimum that I ask of a shortstop is give me good defense. You don't have to hit your weight even. Just don't be a total black hole and give me good defense. He is not. His range is down. Like I said, his arm is down. That means he's not a third baseman. He's not a shortstop. Maybe he's a second baseman, but I have a kid that's coming up that I would much rather get those reps in. Like you said, I forgive Campbell for those mistakes, even at the plate, because he's young. He's learning. He started out impossibly hot. He's cooled down because the league has adjusted to him. We see that all the time. And it's up to this kid who is so young to adjust in turn. Will he? Won't he? We'll find out. Hopefully he will. But you've got to give him time to develop. And right now, it sort of feels like we're throwing wrenches into that plan for no reason. Now, one thing I did want to mention is something I overheard on the broadcast tonight, interestingly enough. I was actually listening to New York's broadcasters, and they pointed out that Abreu is struggling badly on balls sort of on the far side of the zone. When people are throwing it far away from him, he tends to chase and strike out a lot and make poor contact. They said maybe he could try getting closer to the plate to remedy that. At this point, I would be willing to try just about anything because it really feels like this lineup is two people sometimes. It feels like it's Devers and it's Bregman, and everyone else is hot sometimes and cold sometimes. But right now, cold more often than hot. I love Narvaez. I like what Rafaela is doing, but I don't want them leading off or batting cleanup, certainly.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I'll do you one maybe slightly better than your idea, right? I would I would take Story out. I put Meyer there, right? With the way Abreu has been, unless he can make these adjustments, because I talked about in the last podcast, I think long term, or at least for like the short window of 4 years that we realistically have here with everyone that is on the squad, you got to keep Jaron Duran. He is the spark plug to this team at this point. I would take Abreu out. I put Roman Anthony. Let's pull the Band-Aids off. Let's get Mayer up. Let's put Roman Anthony. I would even be willing to put David Hamilton at first, because you know what? Yeah, he's not going to give you the defense that Story can, but he will give you the occasional big home run or the hit that you need in late innings, because, yeah, he strikes out probably more than Sogard does, but Sogard doesn't come up with a big hit, like, ever. And we're never going to see that. The one thing I could say about David Hamilton, the moment is never really too big for him. Now, whether he actually hits the ball or not is a whole nother question, but when he does, he could swing into a big hit, a home run that could win you a game late in innings. And I think we're immensely better from a defensive perspective up the middle, and not playing around with Campbell. Just get him focused at second base. And there's no way Roman Anthony could be as inconsistent as Abreu. And if he is, he's a rookie. We would expect it. So what are your thoughts, Jim?
Yeah, I mean, the bottom line here is that I've been, like I said, I've been very vocal on Campbell. Not to beat a dead horse, but he needs to get one position and stay there. So hopefully they're going to make their minds up on that and go with it. And he can understand that he can stay at that position and then hopefully start working on his hitting again. Because quite frankly, at this point, he's been basically a black hole offensively as well from that first start that he had. And to Nick's point, obviously the league is figuring him out, but he's also too trying to learn 2 or 3 different defensive positions. And I said this about Rafaela last year. I kind of gave him a pass on his offensive deficiencies because he had to learn shortstop on the fly. I mean, not that he didn't know how to play it, but I mean, there still are a lot of intangibles playing the defense. Are you covering? Am I covering? And knowing the tendencies of the hitters and who sprays where. But the bottom line is he had to learn 2 positions as a rookie. So it's a little tough for him as well. But I wanted to kind of focus and kind of switch gears, if you guys want, about the upcoming series starting tomorrow night. We got the Orioles coming in. Again, as I mentioned earlier in tonight's broadcast, a complete disappointment. Obviously, their manager has been fired after being manager of the year. So what are your thoughts on this series? What are your expectations, Nick?
Right now, we are looking at a 4-game series versus one of the worst rotations really assembled in the modern era. I don't even think that's an exaggeration to say. Everyone knew that rotation was going to be bad coming into the season, and sure enough, it's completely failing. From what I've seen on probable pitchers, and Chris, you might be able to double check this, I believe we're actually dodging Sagano, who, even though the FIP hasn't been particularly impressive, he's really been the only reason that their team ERA is closer to 5 than 6 as a starter. We should be going down looking at really just old, washed up arms. I'm sorry to be blunt, but you have to be. And if we don't go and wake up our bats and put up at least 20 runs over the course of this series, I'm going to be extremely concerned about the long-term offensive production of this unit.
Yeah, we get Kremer, Eflin, Morton,
Oh,
and Povich in this series. So you are correct, Nick. Um, I'd love to go into this positive, and I've been more positive than I haven't this season, especially in lieu of last year. But like, it would just be so Sox 2025 Sox to split this series, right? It's not quite enough where we're like, oh, this team's cooked. And it's not quite enough where it's like, all right, we've taken some opportunity. It's as Jim said, it's mid. It's right there, just sitting there with like, we kind of have some hope, but we're kind of drowning.
yeah.
A championship team, or one that is striving for a championship, should be able to take all 4 of those games at home. There's really no excuse. The problem is that I have absolutely no faith that they could do something like that. When you go 4-3 against the White Sox, who are arguably the worst team on the planet. So if they can't beat the White Sox, I don't have a lot of faith that they can, to your point, Chris, be able to do better than 2-2. So unfortunately, that's my call. It's going to be a 2-2 split with the Orioles in this 4-game series. And if tomorrow is rained out because it's supposed to be god awful, that means we're probably going to be facing a doubleheader, unless there is some off day that both teams have. Being that it's an American League East team, a lot of times they may not do a doubleheader if there is a off day that both of them share. So that remains to be seen how tomorrow night handles. But looking at some of the Orioles statistics while we're on the air here, there definitely is a lot of struggling offensively for them as well. Gunnar Henderson is at 257, Mullins 236, Mountcastle 230, Rushman's batting 213, Jackson Holiday 268. So a lot of struggling going on with their team offensively. And their pitching, to both your points, has been abysmal. So we'll see how it is. Charlie Morton's got an ERA a little over 7. I mean, they're ripe to be destroyed, but this is the 2025 Red Sox, who can't get out of their own way.
This could be a get right series for a lot of those pitchers,
Yep.
unfortunately. I hate to say it. Yeah, I don't see them not splitting. And you know what would be so Red Sox is we end up getting the rain out tomorrow. There's a doubleheader. We win the first 2, which you never expect, and then we lose the next 2.
Yeah.
That's what I'll book it. That's what's going to happen.
I could definitely see that, 2-2 would not surprise me at all. It seems like it's sort of on brand for the post-championship Red Sox, really dating back many years, to play to the level of our competition. Good teams come to town like the Mets. We managed to take 2 games off of them. My God, we think we're back, fly the banner. And then the Orioles come to town and we find a way to just make an ass of ourselves, quite frankly. I'm going into this not optimistic, but 3 out of 4 I think is doable. I'm hoping that Devers and Bregman and even Duran, these guys can right themselves. This should, in theory, be batting practice, but we'll see what happens.
Well, I think if you're a betting man, you got Giolito in game 1. I have no faith with him. You do have Bayo, Dobbins, and Bueller in the final 3. I feel good about the Bueller start. I feel good about the Dobbins start. Bayo, after his last outing, I'm a little bit apprehensive. So I think that's again why I'm going to stay with the 2-2. But 3-1 is what you should expect. You really should expect 4-0, but I digress with that.
Well, the Bayo one's a toss-up because it is a night game, so there is somewhat of a chance. Not saying there's a chance, but there might be a chance. But yeah, again, betting man, I'm going to say it's a split at this point, but there's only one way to find out, and that's we got to play the games, we got to watch the games. But that is all we have for you tonight. Again, the Sox waste a complete prime opportunity to sweep the New York Mets and get themselves right. Instead, they only take 2 out of 3 and not feeling too good about it. Thank you for spending some time with us. Go Sox.